It's such an honor to be with you, sir, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. You are the chairman of the Institute for Political Economy here in the United States. You are a former Wall Street editor and an author of many, many books. In Europe, we love you because you have a perspective that many do not have, as you speak in broad manners about the important issues of foreign policy and the state of the American culture today.
The worst thing, there's several really terrible things have happened to the United States. The worst thing that's happened to the United States in my lifetime was the collapse of the Soviet Union. This was absolutely the worst thing, not only for the United States, but for the entire world, because it removed the only constraint on American unilateralism. As long as the Soviet Union was there was a limit to Washington's ability to bully and dominate. It could do it in South America, excluding Cuba. It could do it in Western Europe. And of course, it had firm control of Japan. But most of the world was immune to this kind of bullying because the Soviet Union was there. It was an alternative. It could check American unilateralism. And both sides pretty much knew where the line was. Well, when the Soviet Union collapsed, the constraint on American unilateralism disappeared. There was now nothing to constrain Washington's power or its hegemony. And this happened right at the time when a new ideology in the United States was rising up, the ideology of the neoconservatives. Now, the neoconservative ideology is that America is the indispensable country. It is the exceptional country. Now, what does it mean when you say that? If the United States is indispensable, it means everyone else is dispensable. If the United States is exceptional, it means everyone else is unexceptional. It's a claim to hegemony over mankind. It's like we are God's chosen people, not the Jews. We Americans. This is the neoconservative ideology, and it has dominated American foreign policy since Bill Clinton's regime. These people came into the government first in the Reagan years. I know them. They caused a mess. Reagan fired them. He prosecuted them. George Herbert Walker Bush, the first Bush, Papa Bush, when he succeeded Reagan, he pardoned them. They didn't have much influence in his government, but beginning with Clinton, this is where the attacks on Serbia came from, with the sanctions on Iraq that killed 500,000 Iraqi children, that the Clinton Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, said was worth it. Can you imagine a woman saying something's worth killing 500,000 children? It shows how hard the ideology is, you see. It's merciless. It's a merciless ideology. Nothing counts but Washington's hegemony. It's really not even American hegemony. It's Washington's hegemony. And of course, with George W. Bush, the neoconservatives completely ran the government. The real president was Dick Cheney, the vice president, hardline neoconservative. The Secretary of Defense The State Department was full of them. The Pentagon was full of them. They completely dominated the National Security Council. This is where 9/11 came from. This is where the war on Afghanistan and Iraq came from.
And we all remember so well the American four-star general Wesley Clark, who wrote a book about it later too, and also spoke about in a number of TV interviews later how he was shocked post 9/11 when he found out that there were plans in the Pentagon of destroying nation after nation and
7 countries in 5 years.
Yes, and he speaks about that, how he felt that there was a neocon foreign policy, a coup in the United States at the time that we know, of course, in retrospect has brought the U.S. into such a havoc. And maybe America today is one of the most hated countries in the world. I live in the Middle East and I see people just wonder, you know, hundreds of thousands have to die. And they ask, is democracy, you know, is that something to be bombed on us?
Yeah. Well, I think Wesley Clark was shocked, but it showed that he was unaware of the neoconservative ideology, because they had all been in the government for some time, even while he was the commander of American forces in Europe. He was the NATO commander, as well as I remember. He was unaware of this ideology, even though Wolfowitz, a high Pentagon official, in the early 1990s set it out. He wrote that the principal goal of American foreign policy is to prevent the rise of any other power, especially Russia, that could serve as a constraint on American unilateralism. This is actually, you can find this online. It's a Pentagon document that he wrote. Now, others in the government thought this was a little bit too obvious, and they toned it down a little bit, but they didn't change the meaning. So this is what I meant when I said that the worst thing that happened was the collapse of the Soviet Union, because it removed the constraint, it let the neoconservatives make these kinds of claims, and it has ever since dominated our foreign policy. And of course, the neoconservatives are very closely allied with Israel. In fact, most of them are Zionists. Some of them are dual citizens. And in my opinion, this is why the American unilateralism began in the Middle East, because it's been directed at the countries that supply Hezbollah, the militia in Lebanon that twice defeated the Israeli army from occupying southern Lebanon. Israel wants the water resources of southern Lebanon, and twice sent in the army, and twice Hezbollah drove it out. Well, who supplied Hezbollah? Iraq, Syria, Iran. This is why we have so much pressure in the United States from Israel to continue the war on Assad and to start the war with Iran. Because if Iran and Assad are not supplying Hezbollah, then there's nothing to block Israel from expanding into southern Lebanon. So if you look, in fact, it's obvious if you just look at the media, so much of the attack on Iran is Israeli inspired. And it's the Israelis who want to use the American forces to put Iran in the same chaos that Iraq is in, and which they hoped Syria would be in, and would be had it not been for the Russian intervention. So this is another aspect because it shows a alliance between the ruling ideology in the United States, that is the foreign policy ideology, you see there are two ideologies, the neoconservative one of American hegemony and the identity politics ideology. Both of these are destructive in their own ways. When you get the dose of both of them, you're really in trouble. So that is a situation that's difficult for a president because the Israel lobby is very powerful. There have been numerous books written about it. There have been numerous senators and congressmen who have said, we lost because we opposed something Israel wanted. In fact, if Israel wants something, it usually gets voted unanimously. It's very, very seldom that even two members of the entire Congress will vote against something in Israel's behalf. So they are a powerful entity. The Wall Street crowd and the big banks are a powerful entity. The military security complex, probably the most powerful, because it has the intelligence agencies who can control explanations, who can fabricate cases, who can fabricate events, who can claim things happened that didn't, because under the guise of national security, they don't have to ever tell you. They just say it. Oh, we can't show you the evidence because it would compromise national security. See, they can get away with this. So when you have a country like that and then it doesn't have a media, so the question is, who's in control? Well, whoever controls the explanations. And they're easy to control because of the reasons we've said. The media is organized in 6 hands, and they're not run by journalists.
So thank you very much. We are so honored to have spoken to you.
Well, thank you very much for including me in your wonderful programs.